Hello and welcome to the Talks of Life podcast. I'm your host, Brittany Jacobs, and I'm so excited to be back and recording for my podcast here. We have a very exciting guest today. Her name is Diana Geraldo. Diana has over 25 years of experience in community development and sustainability in the public and private sectors. She is the founder and chief creative officer of Community Development Reimagined, a sustainability and resiliency consulting firm. Her focus and passion have always been centered around the sustainability of the built environment, from working in construction to government as a regulator, to starting her own consulting business and working on innovative projects. She has worked with national and state agencies and recently joined the City Council of Fort Myers, sharing her passion for sustainability and strategic impact, where she feels it would make substantial change at the local and state levels. I'm truly inspired by her commitment and passion for creating change and would like to recognize the work Diana is doing. We first connected at the sustainability event in Fort Myers a few years ago, and I've kept in touch to learn more about the work that she continues to do. So today we're just gonna kind of pick apart your brain and kind of figure out, why is this kind of your calling and your passion with purpose, if you will. So please kind of briefly describe a little bit of your background and what inspired your path towards sustainability, Miss Diana?
Very good. Well, thank you so much for having me in your podcast. I do appreciate your passion and then appreciate keeping in touch on the connection. So I'm pretty humble to be in your podcast today. So, little bit of background. I'm an immigrant. I'm from Colombia, South America. Immigrated to the United States 26 years ago this week. And I always had a curiosity about the built environment, nature and that sort of thing. So it kind of took me into going to school to being an architect. I wanted to be an artist, but that's a separate conversation for another podcast. But obviously, being like the second person in my family to go to college, I think that having something tangible as far as my education was very much something that my parents encouraged, and obviously I quickly found passion in architecture. So I went to school to be an architect, and I had mainly worked in the construction field, but I just felt like it was a tax that you do the thing, and yes, you check the box and there is some accomplishment, but there was something missing there. So um, I think that I had a passion for like sustainability and resiliency and those topics before that was even really a word. But the things that that you want to do better for your planet, that you want to do better for the community, and that you can create a really good harmony between um, the work that you do and what nature provides, right? Like what's available to us. So that um, it's kind of like a calling, when you have it in you and you just kind of love what you do, and that it's like inspired to do the work because it's just a source of inspiration. Sometimes hard to describe in words.
Hmm. So do you feel you've always been pretty connected to nature? So having that respect for it and finding the balance, living within nature and not just destroying it, of course.
Yeah, I think it's I mean, if you think about nature, nature is a system. Nature is a system of its own. A work of its own. Nature is actually the blueprint of life in every aspect, right? So if you think about a system, if you think about many types of work, you see it replicated in nature in different ways, whether it's animals or whether it's plants, water, anything. It is a cycle, it is a system, and so you see it there. So it's just really a good example, and I think that looking at that as a system and being able to create those synergies, I think is overlooked. And I think that is it was kind of like my takeaway from working in construction, early on in my life.
Mhm. Yeah, so that kind of inspires the next question of how those experiences working in construction, perhaps maybe seeing them clear cut, land at the cost of, really bringing in maybe a variety of different new plants. Can you kind of speak to how that was very eye-opening and maybe how it didn't make much sense to you?
Yeah, yeah, and we still see a lot of that, but I think that early on when I started working, obviously you start working on a project and it's a blank slate. But before there was a blank slate, there was something there, and so I started questioning, if we could have saved the tree, or when you see a picture and it's like, oh, that was there, and so I think that really so I started asking a lot of questions, and it's like, how do we mimic? How do we replicate? How do we not make everything asphalt? How do we um, create those synergies? Maybe saving some of the trees. Maybe I mean, you have development is there. It needs to exist, right? It's part of the evolution of towns. But how can we minimize the impact, or how can we integrate the components? And I think that that was part of the early experiences that I had in there. And obviously this was like over 20 years ago, and so it was kind of like unheard of unless someone was really passionate about it. So it really made me think about, that and the environmental impact. You start seeing things that you see and that you saw then and you still see now, like flooding, and how do you mitigate for those things. So and now lately it's kind of like the impact that we have on the people. Ultimately, we're not building for the buildings, we're building for people. So how do we start integrating those elements? And this is nothing different, crazy, or out of the ordinary, but it's really to having that thoughtful process. So one of the things that I learned is, even though I was an architect working in construction, is that some of the maybe the folks that design the projects, you're designing it for functionality, but we're forgetting some of the other aspects. And then you have like the civil engineer, and know that they have, it is, those are very complex roles, but how do they play together, and how do we look at creating more landscapes and things like that? How are we creating elements and developments for people, and having that integration is not just the building is for the people.
26 years ago, no one really talking about sustainability or even the concept of a green building. Do you feel like there was one pivotal point in time that maybe, oh gosh, like you feel like, wow, I'm that person who can make a difference within that, kind of again that, wow, I'm called to do this work, but you don't really find leaders within the industry talking about it or even making sense of, trying to create a little bit of synergy with your civil engineer, your, I guess, the developer itself, and even the owner of the land. However, all those different stakeholders, really how that works. It seems very complex.
Yeah, and it's just very interesting because it's like I felt at the moment is like the things that like I just know this is something. But unless you have a mechanism to like track it or be organized about it, right? Can be like you throw one thing one day and then the next thing is something else. And I think that's how like green building standards came about. But for me, so I worked in construction, and then I thought, well, if I want to inspire some change and create some really serious synergies, I'm going to go work in government and maybe being a regulator, not to regulate, but really to inspire some change through policy. Well, I tried that. That didn't really work, because when you're inside government, is really so you're either in a position where you can create a change, but really when you're working, you're in government, you're really administering, and it takes a village. It takes the elected official. It takes a bunch of people standing behind. Looking into policies that really support sustainability. And in all honesty, this became at one point in time a forbidden word to be used, and I don't really know why, but this is really for us to to really come together and put all the elements that we need to grow in a healthy society.
Hmm. Right, because I guess there's really no, short-term sustainability. It's long-term thinking,
Yep.
um,
Yep.
yeah, not just 10 years down the road, but maybe even as far as 100 to 1,000 years. Again, just trying to not, I guess, stress about mitigating for floods and God knows what else comes our way. But again, just
Right.
thinking solutionary, wise, how do you just solve that problem and nick it in the butt before it even continues? A little brief story about how you worked in the government. That was for a couple of years, I understand. You did it for five or more years?
I think I worked in government for like seven. I
Mhm.
think it was 7 or 8.
Hmm.
So, um,
So what were
and
those
then I couldn't
like,
stay.
uh like daily battles? Did you just feel like of course you were learning, I guess, avenues in which you could really make that change? Um,
Yeah, I want to say that there were a few things that I was able to accomplish, and I was part of like a larger group, and we created a sustainability plan that it was like county based, and then we put some measures. Like I worked um, for a municipality, so we were able to put some things in place. But it really, like you said, this is not like, oh, we're just going to make everybody feel good right now. If you don't have a long term plan, that's what sustainability is all about. So, uh, it didn't really have, when you are working on something, you kind of want to have like I won't say like an end game, but you want to be able to create that meaningful impact. And I don't think that, when you're just working on it, like call it a pet project, it really doesn't help you advance in that aspect. I think that the other challenge that I had on my own, since I understood this before it was a thing, I think the other challenge that I had in front of me is that people didn't understand what it really meant. And when you're working in the constraints of, here's my dog. Hey, Luna. In the constraints of government, sometimes it is hard to really achieve that cohesiveness when you're working with like different departments and different people, and you're adding maybe something, an additional task. So uh, certainly it's a challenge that we still see, but I mean, we're in a different hat now, so it is. I have a lot more traction.
sure. So did you feel often defeated, I guess, in that position?
It was very challenging. I don't want to say that I was the most loved person, right? Some people took it seriously, and they were like, "Okay, we're gonna support you. We're gonna do this. We're gonna do that." But there was a lot of pushback, and I think eventually, all together, they, you know. That position was kind of like, once I left the city, that disappeared, which is the tale of it wasn't really a long term, um, a decision that it was made long term. It was just for the moment. And so, yeah, it was challenging. It was challenging. I think that um, I put a lot of work and a lot of thought into it. We could have done a lot more.
Hmm. Right. But now you're able to take these ideas and I would imagine apply them to the work you're doing, and that gives
Yep.
you more peace of mind and yeah, the freedom to create kind of through that
Yes.
visionary work where I could see government officials maybe don't get that bigger picture of how it's
Hmm.
affecting, yeah, the environment, the economy, and the people all at the same time.
Right.
Trying to create that picture and really explaining sustainability, even through my own exposure, it just seems like, yeah, this complex monster that we're all trying to kind of fight. But again, it's a system in itself that I do believe that we can build better sustainable systems. It's just a matter of actually designing and implementing that. And policy is great. It would be
Hmm.
fantastic if this was all just, written, I guess, in fine words that, we have to conserve, lighting and energy and all the resources that we just seem to be depleting at no end. So it's
Right.
kind of very frustrating as a millennial and even someone who wants to kind of think that seventh generation philosophy of being able to sustain our village. But yeah, it can at times feel overwhelming, but that's why I enjoy talking to individuals like you who seem to have a very positive outlook on the future, because you're kind of at that groundwork and doing, what we all would maybe like to be doing, but I have a little bit of a fear of intimidation of, yeah, leaders, and yeah, that pushback about maybe not being understood. So, can you maybe share more about what really pushed you to start your consulting firm and what year that all was created?
So, yes, so when I couldn't save the world being in government as a regulator, I think even my boss at the time said, "Hey, you're just really pushing against the current, and you're really like you just have so much to give and so much to put out there, and I think that you need to consider being an entrepreneur, start your own business." Which I wasn't really, I mean, I knew it, but it's kind of scary to jump out there on your own. So I did that. I think that the year was 2014. Ever since I kind of phased out and I started another company, which is my current company that I started in 2020, doing the same work. Um, but I think it was a combination of the desire of people that really believed in the work that I did and my education and my capabilities and the vision that said, "Hey, I think this is what you should be doing." So, um, it's kind of taking that leap of faith and just jumping in and becoming an entrepreneur. So that a lot of emotions included in that, but I think it was being the inspiration was knowing that there is something really valuable here that can be done, and if I can be a catalyst for that, then let's try that. So it is very successful.
Mhm. That's beautiful. Along the way, have you met others that are doing similar work? Or I don't know how big, I guess, sustainability consulting is growing to be.
Um, yes, I get to you know, trying to solve large issues with development projects and things like that. The reality is that you can't, I mean, I take on projects. So, for example, to do a green building certification, but you have to collaborate with other folks that are in that field so you can create a team that really puts in a lot of thought and a lot of work into the what you have to deliver. That's kind of being able to work in teams and be able to create that. I know that there are a lot of companies out there that do sustainability consulting, but they're focusing more on maybe green certifications and things like that. So it becomes mechanical. And I think that the difference uh, between me and a few of other companies and then the large majority is that we're looking at the big picture, like how do you create a plan for a town? How can you be involved in something that really is going to target an issue at the base? And one example is flooding, right? Like um, how did you create a sustainability plan about solving a flooding issue for a community? You have to look at the bigger picture. So a lot of um, there's not a lot of companies that kind of get into that work, but you really have to, in the world of the work that I do, you really have to play with other consultants that are like larger at a bigger level if you're trying to tackle a big master plan for a town or something like that. So um it becomes collaborative work. I
Mhm.
don't think that everybody's passionate at the same level, but we're all trying to just create a better space for humans.
Right. And I could imagine that's, different in each region, of course, state level, and then kind of going throughout our country. Sustainability looks different everywhere, I guess. Kind of that same foundation of, again, conserving resources and reducing waste. But the overarching, I guess, problems that may be facing look different in each community.
Mhm.
What kind of projects feel you made a really big impact or have lit you up the most, that you're very proud of in the most recent years?
I have some really cool projects that just really have filled my soul. But one of them that completed a couple of years ago, and it's an example of many, but this was very, two of them that were very inspirational. Well, one of them was a volunteer with Lee County government when I was appointed to be in the resiliency task force, which it was members of the community with a particular area of expertise and background. And so I was appointed by one of the county commissioners to be in one of the task forces. And it really allowed me the opportunity to incorporate a lot of my experience and my education into a plan that would support our community, as it was part of the recovery from Hurricane Ian. So that was really meaningful to be able to serve my community in that aspect. So not every work, not every job is paid, right? That's one of those that is very inspiring. I worked as one of the consultants for the City of Fort Myers Parks Master Plan a couple of years ago. So there's a big component of sustainability and just heat island effect mitigation and being able to work more so creating that built environment that is more friendly to lower temperatures and create spaces for people. A lot of the placemaking part of sustainability. So that was very exciting. And right now I'm working. So those two projects are very meaningful to me. Right now I'm working on a project of redevelopment of 20 acres, an area that got devastated by Hurricane Ian. And my client is looking into making this 20-acre redevelopment like a state-of-the-art, full-on sustainable project. And it has workforce housing, it has condominiums, it potentially will have a an art center, and but how it is being built on a pedestal and just creating all these different elements for connectivity and landscapes that are not just what the code minimum requires, but really something that is enhancing using solar and creating elements for people to want to be, to want to love to be there or want to come visit there, because you'll have restaurants and stuff like that. So it's kind of like a master plan. So that's a really fun project. And the other project that I'm working on and I'm super passionate about, I'm working with the Florida Housing Coalition, and we have this resiliency task force, and this is really to tackle some of the challenges that we have with affordable housing and just kind of providing some guidance, especially for smaller organizations that are creating home ownership opportunities. So it's more to come. We just started that task force, so that's something fun that also is an unpaid job, but it is very fulfilling because the goal is to be able to provide some really great solutions in the community that anyone in the affordable housing arena across the state can use.
That is pretty cool. Definitely looking forward to seeing those projects evolve. So do you foresee that maybe in the next 10 years that would be kind of coming to a closer completion phase?
So out of the two projects, the first one I mentioned, this master plan reconstruction from the hurricane, that will take about 10 years, if not more, to happen. It is big. And we just started kind of the work from the design perspective. With the Florida Housing Project, I think that our timeline is to have something out there conceptual for next year. That will be probably presented at the Florida Housing Conference, at the American Institute of Architects Conference next year in 2026. But how it gets implemented, it really all depends on the individuals that are able, like the developers and the individuals that are able to use that. It will be a resource, hopefully, for many years to come. So even if folks are not building anything, if they need guidelines, the goal is that we create the guidelines. So we have experts from all kinds of different backgrounds getting involved. So that my part is sustainability and resilience. So everybody wears a different hat.
I'm curious, has the state and or county really seen projects like this, or this is kind of new to I guess, the sustainable development side of affordable housing, to which it seems like a little bit more intentional community is being built.
Yes, I want to say that, well, I think there's two parts of it. Florida, the state of Florida, any funding that is given by the state, that money comes from the federal government, and the state allocates a lot of the funding for affordable housing development. All those developments, all new developments, have to have a green building certification. And the reason being is because you got to be able to lower um utility cost, and it's one of the big, the things that are tangible, but your cost of your water, your cost of your electric. But in recent years, the application, where these projects are located, they have to be within walking distance to a bus stop, to a school, to, it has to have all these elements. And if you look at old projects that were affordable housing related, they barely had any open green space. And now there is a requirement to have the social component for people to gather and have green space and trees and that sort of thing. So I work with a lot of my clients are affordable housing developers, and I help them kind of create, like, do some placemaking work within their developments if they bring me early on into the project. And that it is part of sustainability. What are you creating intentionally for open green spaces for passive or active recreation, even for people to gather, but just to really to get people out of the building. So that has been something that has been on the forefront of Florida Housing Finance Corporation, which is the funder of a lot of these projects. And so I think that I don't think that's going anywhere. So it is a blessing that we're able to make sure that, especially those that are, working to stabilize themselves financially, really take advantage of these resources.
Yeah, and it just seems like, for lack of better words, a sustainable way of living, of course. Is there, I guess, plans to provide any type of community garden or like a food forest within these communities? Because that's something I struggle with, I guess accepting sustainability as a concept. But it
Mm-hmm.
doesn't seem like there's much, I guess, creative ideas or planning around how we can secure food. Fresh food, of course, nutritious food, understanding that food deserts are a thing, and what makes a community sustainable would be having access to fresh, nutritious food. Yeah, I guess I'm just curious, maybe why that's so overlooked, or how, yeah, again, thinking outside the box, communities can maybe implement indoor houses, grow house, excuse me, like a greenhouse rather, um, or something of that sort to grow at least fresh greens or even tomatoes, again, to alleviate the cost of living.
Right. No, and that's a really good point. Very close to my heart too. It all comes down to, I would say that if I'm involved in a project early on when they're doing like the visioning of what's going to happen with their open space, um, um, I always try to, uh, I'm always incorporating like places to sit, gardens, shade, gazebos, little barbecue place, to have a lot of those things in mind. And I always ask is like, hey, are you going to have a community garden? Oh, we haven't thought of that. Sometimes I say, well, what about a community garden? If I'm really kind of, they're giving me a plan and said, okay, what are the possibilities? What about a community garden? Oh, we're not doing that. So if it gets shut down from the beginning, I know, but so it comes from the developer. Now, one thing for folks to understand is that if you put a community garden, you kind of have to have the folks that want to be part of the garden and want to help grow the garden. And so that always becomes a challenge, right? It all depends on the type of community. If you're building for seniors, you'll probably have a lot more folks that are willing to get to learn and get involved in the garden. if you're developing for families, families are busy, they have kids and that sort of thing. So the operation of the garden, I think it becomes a little bit of a challenge sometimes in the decision making process. But we have also projects like the housing authority of the city of Fort Myers that created this big um, kind of like community plan. They're reconstructing 30 acres of land that used to be low income and now is going to be mixed income. But part of their big picture in the community is to create space for commercial, to have a grocery store in a food desert area, to have a garden. And that's something that I'm working with and being able to incorporate hydroponics. And the beauty of it is it does not have to happen on site. It is going to likely happen across the street where there is a school that is not just a school, but it's a community school, and they can benefit from having fresh produce. So, but that is a collaboration project. So there are at least 15 entities around the city that have been involved in this since 2019 when they put in for a grant, and it is kind of when you work on a project that is a larger scale and you have a vision, you gotta have someone that is going to like always point to the reminder of this was our vision and we had this in the plan. So I'm happy to be one of those ones that is pushing for this hydroponic to happen. So it depends on, I think folks count on like the developer to incorporate these elements and the creativity level for sure.
Mhm. Yeah, you mentioned, the big collaboratory word. It just seems like it's kind of a no-brainer to have maybe, yeah, your community school, whether that's elementary, middle, even high school, kind of growing what they can throughout the school year, using what they can inside their own, kitchen, classroom, and cafeteria, and
Mm-hmm.
even circulating the abundance to that surrounding community. I know Fort Myers is pretty big with the nutritional services. I was working with Lee County for a little bit, and there's a big like farm to school, or
Mm-hmm.
it's garden to classroom rather, initiative, and they're doing great works, at the local level. But of course, it just takes like those individuals to keep, I guess, proving through the data collecting and progressive work that they're continuing to do, that it is definitely an initiative that people should consider,
Yeah.
especially putting into elementary schools, because I mean, unfortunately, the kids just don't know where the food's coming from or even how to start from seed. It's just definitely a life skill that I would love to have a little bit more mastery of as well. But it just seems like such an overlooked simple tool to really provide for the community, to stay healthy and active and, socially connected.
Yeah, yeah, and for the kids to know where the food comes from, it does not come from the supermarket.
Mhm. We've kind of bounced a little bit all over the place. I wanted to ask the educational questions to give our listeners a better understanding about what really makes a green building green. So maybe you can kind of describe that a little bit without getting too technical, just so we can all understand what, a green building is in today's world.
All right, I'm going to describe them the best words I can. So, a green building is a building that has a combination of aspects that support the environment, that support the user, that is really looking at um, with the environment, the socioeconomical aspect of it. But it can, you can say that it's like pie in the sky. So, how do we define tangible green building is, I would say the easiest way to point at people is like you have green building certifications, and you have different flavors of green. So it's not just one. There is like, I mean, there used to be just maybe two, and now it's probably like 7 or 8 different types of certifications. So those buildings look at the location of the project. A green building considers the location of the project. how you're developing a sustainable site, and that looks at anything from connectivity to heat island effect to stormwater to flooding, that sort of thing. Looks at transportation, how folks get to and from, and is everybody in a car, or can people commute with riding the bus, or they can ride a bicycle safely, and that sort of thing. So those things are important as far as where the building, the site particularly. And then everything else looks at really improving the baseline of what is required. Base is a code plus. So building codes regulate, and that's for safety, like it's for minimum safety for the users. So green buildings really go a step up. So when you think about that, is like enhancement of energy consumption. And that doesn't mean that you have to have solar panels, because I talk to folks often and they're like, oh, I have a green building. I put solar panels in my house. And I mean, I'm not going to argue with that, but it's really does not define it as green. And then, what, so it's like energy design, but also because that is conservation, and you can add solar. So you're just adding, you're conserving, but you're also lowering the electric use by adding solar component, or other means of renewable energy. Looking at water conservation, and it's just really being mindful. So I always tell people, if you don't know what to do, the easiest thing you can do is purchase water sense products. Anything that's water sense, it has a low water usage. So it's simple, and it's being able to calculate that, looking at the indoor environmental quality, and that's really important, right? Sick buildings, if we with the pandemic, we learned a lot of that, like purifying the air. But what are the things that you can do from the beginning, from the selection of materials to how the air is in the building, the contaminants in the building, which that's a little more specialized, granular, and could be complicated. The recycling, from the construction standpoint of view, to all the way to how folks really operate in the building, and recycling or lowering the use of disposable materials. And I think in a nutshell, those are the components that make a building green. But the other part of it is that I mentioned what is tangible for folks, and it's often the water and the electricity use. And I think that when you're kind of have those in mind, and you benchmark a building at the design portion of it, and then you look at when it's completed, that is performing the way it's designed, I think that is something that can be tangible for people, because you're able to track not just how much electricity you're using, but how much you're paying over time. And so that design, a building that is commissioned for the energy usage, say that you track the energy for a year, you're able to go back and fix some of the challenges that may have. And it is a good learning exercise for a designer to learn those things across let's say, the first year or two of a project. How can you make it better? What would you do better? What would you change?
So with, the green building, I guess, code and or policy, what has the state implemented recently as far as ensuring that new construction is to a certain standard of green, or is there currently no real set standard?
So there is nothing that's mandatory for private development. That is driven mostly by incentives. So right now there are incentives that the federal government is phasing out, which it doesn't matter if it's federal. Obviously, you can use it in any state, in any area. At the state level, as I mentioned, any housing projects that are affordable or workforce that qualify for the funding that the state offers, they're required to be green buildings, and then, or sustainable buildings. And at the state level, there is a Florida statute that says that any government building, school or university needs to have a kind of like a sustainable building standard, being the doesn't define that it needs to be certified, but it certainly is there as a guideline for design and construction. So that I can tell you that that is often overlooked. But at least those are out there, and they get implemented. And as far as I know, universities use the standard, they follow the standard. I mean, we have the example of FGCU, that your alma mater, that all their buildings are LEED certified.
Yeah, that's, kind of where it all stemmed from, was my introduction to those buildings and understanding what LEED, I guess, has the capability of creating as far as that standard for the industry. But it also seemed like a little bit of a level of greenwashing. And that's the frustrating part of trying to understand, yay for sustainability and, individuals like you and I who really want to make a positive difference, and I guess not joke about how we can conserve and preserve, our finer resources for the future. But it's a complicated mess, I could say. And
Yeah.
you work first-handedly in it, so I guess you kind of have that overarching bigger picture, but like the solutions to the problems, but a very, I guess, strategic way of, impacting them. Because for
Yeah.
me, just from that standpoint of, yeah, you can talk and talk and talk about how we need to have this, that, the other, but who's really, initiating or at least almost demanding that this needs to be taken into serious hands and matters.
Yeah. And I was going to mention something, because you do the work, right? You design, you build, you certify, and you move on.
Mm.
Well, a lot of it is like, and and in the world of sustainability, you can call greenwash, and you have a building that's certified. But from the moment that the building gets certified, moving on, the owner of the project, or whoever is supposed to be overseeing the project, negates all the work that has been done. So as the project moves on into operations, oftentimes the everything that you design and build on, that kind of dissipates, unless the building gets recertified, or unless there is guidelines of how it needs to be maintained. So that I would say that that's the downfall of it, and certainly a lot of opportunity to create some change in there.
I guess what comes to mind when you mentioned that, would that be as simple as, a library or university having, their composting, recycling, and landfill, but people not understanding the difference, and so it's kind of contaminating that initiative? Or would that be something like a poor example of that?
Yeah, no, it is. I mean, a lot of it boils down to education of the managers of the building, the user of the building. But one thing that you brought up, if you have compost, like, so over here we have recycle and we have trash. We don't have compostable, but there has to be a market for that, right? So if there is no market for the compostables that are really buying, picking it up, using it for fertilization purpose, whatever it is. If they're not separated, if they're not, if there is no market, it's really going to be hard to kind of push that on. So right now it's like you recycle or you have trash, and that's it. But those are opportunities.
We'll get there sooner or later. The motivation for running for the city council, how do you find that your sustainability background really meshes with that? And yeah, I guess what inspired that move too?
Well, I think like running for city council is like, I used to work, in government. I understand how it works. I think that having passion, not just for my community, but for creating a better community and kind of having my background, it was like, okay, like I have a gift and I feel like, I mean, I haven't been engaged with, I haven't, not just as an elected official, but for years, ever since I left the city, I've been engaged as a citizen, just bringing my feedback and my thoughts. And it's this journey that you have that things could be better. And so I think that was an inspiration. It's like, well, that position became open because the person that was retired, I'm just gonna put myself out there and really see how I can create some change. And what I've learned is a lot of lack of understanding or maybe education or guidance. And so that's something that I'm able to bring, and that's why I decided to run for council. But when we make decisions or when staff is working on something, being able to say, "Oh, this is an amazing opportunity for us to do this," like we need, say, I'm going to give you an example of something that came up today. Oh, we need some new irrigation in certain areas. So they share the scope of work with us. And I said, oh, well, what about when all of the components, you put it on the request for your vendors and they have to use water sense controllers? Oh, I never thought of that. So it's being able to just, but in all reality, that's my world. That is not the folks that put the scope of work together. That's not their world. So little things like that, being able to generate change, and how do you move those from one action into policy, which is, since I work there, I understand how to do that too.
That's beautiful. That is, like I told you on our first conversation, it fires up my solar plexus because, yeah, it just feels like you're right where you need to be and co-creating that change that you've been, kind of on that journey of figuring out how to do without stepping on any toes. But yeah, just kind of, being the voice for our planet and sustainability as a whole, to just walk a little more gently, it feels, and connecting to nature versus just creating concrete buildings.
Well, it's quality of life. Quality of life. We all want that. All as humans, we have that in common. No one can argue that. So you need space. You need space. You need more than just buildings.
Yes, it's definitely good for mental health. Just human connectivity as we continue to evolve with and without technology. Just kind of disconnecting from everything, and I guess remembering what the more important and lighter things in life are all about. Having those barbecues and walks along, garden and seeing the butterflies and bees and birds. It's refreshing to say the least, but understanding that there's so many built up cities where you maybe can't find that experience. How do we not necessarily remove the human, but bring the connectivity of nature closer to the human, and yeah, hopefully reconnect everyone's spirit to understanding the concept and power of sustainability as a whole. Fun question to be asked here. If you had unlimited resources and influence, what's one bold move you would make tomorrow to accelerate sustainability in our state?
Wow, that's a tough question. um, I think that we have to, obviously, a lot of the work that is done in government and really trickles down to how you do it is policy. But I think in a policy now, I would say, not of mandate, but of reward and incentives for us to look at sustainability in a way that it is positive. There are incentives that can be created and there are possibilities. And how does that look like? I think that you put it into policy, it trickles down, you reward it. That is an incentive. But a lot of the stuff that can happen, you can create pilot projects and you lead by example. So you can say, well, this is the policy that I want, and this is what I mean by it because it's been done in a particular way. And I'd say that would be a bold move because you have to convince a lot of people.
Right. I
Yeah.
guess a better question would be, kind of reversing the question, what is the main resource you would want to protect in Florida? Would you want to conserve? I guess I always personally think, okay, sunshine, state, solar. We could basically power the world with the amount of
Oh,
energy that we could produce here. But thinking more realistically, is it going to be conserving water? Is that probably a more important resource?
yeah. I'm in. You asked me for one, but I'm going to say probably three of them.
Mhm.
Water, not just conservation, but water quality and protection of our waterways, because tourism is such a big, big part of why people come to Florida. And it's like to go to the beach, to go be outdoors. And so we have to protect that. So I think that, so it's the water quality for waterways, water conservation, and really preservation of our open space, green space, and be able to implement more the um, planting of more trees and be able to lower the heat island effect. I think those will be my priorities.
Yeah, I can see that heat island is real. I mean, especially at the heat of summer right now.
It's ridiculous. And you see the difference. I would tell you that this weekend I was in Central Florida, and it was one of the hottest summers, really. It was super hot. Like someone sent me the screenshot, it was like 100 degrees outside. Where I was, we had a storm and the electricity went out, but we were like in a very wooded area and there were a lot of trees, and we were without electricity for like 6 hours, and I didn't break a sweat because we were surrounded by trees and a tree canopy. So it cools the temperature. So that is a real thing. And I love palms, but palms don't provide that effect.
Yeah, I think we're all searching for the little shaded, oak tree in the parking lot at this point. So it's
Yeah, yeah.
not being lit
Otherwise,
by.
like a palm tree is like trying to find shade behind a light post.
When we had first talked, I was inspired to ask, what advice would you give to young professionals who are seeking to make a difference with sustainable initiatives and local impact in their communities? We briefly touched about getting connected at the city council level. But yeah, what more can we do to make our voices heard?
Yeah, so I think like young professionals, and we really need them involved. Obviously, finding the interest into getting involved in something like that. I think that being involved in local government, so all local governments have advisory boards of different capacities. You have for beautification or historic preservation or bicycle and pedestrian board. So there's different ways that young professionals can contribute, volunteering the time in any of these boards because it will make a difference. Never be shy of contacting your elected officials if you have a challenge and you have an idea. I always say, if you have a problem, what is your idea of how that can be changed? Because obviously, if you spotted the issue, you might have an idea of how that can be solved. So never be shy of reaching to your elected official, not particularly when there is a problem, but to build a relationship. Because when you have something to share, you have a gift, you have some knowledge, you have some education, you have an idea, and you build a relationship with the elected official, will remember, right? I have folks that share something with me and it's like, oh, that's such a great idea. Or they did some volunteer work and they can present it to us. I will remember that commitment to community. So I think that reaching out, building those relationships, understanding how government work, and really, if any of the young professionals are inspired to becoming an elected official, I look at it two ways. You can be a politician, which I'm not. I'm an elected official and I have deep passion for my community. And when you have that calling, you don't need to be in politics. You don't need to be You don't need to understand public administration. You don't need any of that. The desire to serve is enough. And I think that the other is like with community projects. Do you have an idea of something that you can implement? Can you implement it and show us an example of something that can be done? Or do you have an idea of something that happens somewhere else and you need the support to make it happen? And many of us may have the possibility to support that idea, either through the city or through our individual offices. But we certainly need more folks that are involved and want to put in their time and effort.
For sure. And again, I guess if the city and or state's not seeing any quote unquote demand for this type of change, what's the point, right? There's no incentive, there's no reason, people don't
Yep.
vote. But if the more
Yep.
voices, I guess, are shouting that, what are you doing to our land, our resources, etc., maybe more of that will be heard and recognized and of course now implemented into progressive change.
Right. And I can tell you one thing. A lot of policies and things that change locally and even at the state level, someone had an idea. And you might see these ideas out there, and it's like, what were they thinking? Well, it's not the elected official particularly, but it's someone that had an idea and they just kept at it, kept talking to them about it. Sometimes it's the wrong information and wrong education. Well, the elected official is not like an encyclopedia. It's not Google, and he doesn't know everything. So when you have someone that is selling you something, it can be negative, but the elected official might not know any different. And that's the opportunity to counter that by like you said, if there is no noise, well, it is not needing or nothing is it's not needed or nothing is happening, and that does make a difference being involved, and hence the importance of being engaged.
Again, because the quality of life is an influence to just be better.
Yeah, for sure.
So what keeps you hopeful in the face of, these environmental changes, and challenges, I guess, that we face with policy being changed and, it feels like administration takes a few steps forward and then 15 steps back. For lack of better words, it kind of feels like a game, but what makes you feel hopeful and I guess inspired to keep the momentum that you have?
Um, there is a lot more good to be done than anything else. Hence the importance of staying engaged and volunteering and showing up when something doesn't look right. And one example is, I think last year we witnessed private developers trying to privatize state parks to develop them. Well, the folks showed up in masses, and it was kind of like there were public meetings, but they made them very fast and not a lot of room for public input. And that's an attempt to really diminish the power that people have to voice their opinion, to stand up for what is right and really support those efforts. People showed up in masses, sent letters, called their state reps, all the folks at the state level, and they shut that down because that is it's a real challenge. But if people don't show up, like you said, if you don't hear why people are standing up for what is right and protect the environment, then people must not care. And you hear a lot of people saying, well, government is going to do whatever they want, or, oh, they're talking about it, but they're not going to move forward with it. Well, that is ignoring the issue is also part of the problem. So what keeps me hopeful is that there are a lot more people that are engaged and wanting to see some of these things happening than not. And that's what really keeps me going. And I think the other part of it, me personally, at my little bubble local level, being able to share the why and educate those that allow me to share some of the experiences. And that doesn't mean that I know everything, but sometimes you share something and you make people think, and that really can create some changes, can create a difference.
Yeah, you got to shift their perspective, or at least wipe their lens clean of what junk might be in front of them.
Right.
But yeah, it's kind of, shaking people up to see what, change can be brought. It's nothing against like, oh, capitalism can't continue, but we can just do better. And that's where, that solutionary mindset of seeing a problem and wanting to fix it. But yeah, you got to be a little bit practical about your strategy and how you actually are going to change that. Do you have a personal mantra or a philosophy that guides your work, or is it really just, your passion and calling as you shared?
So you mentioned something last, and is like when there is a challenge, there is always an opportunity. So you can look at life or any circumstance that gets in front of you as a problem. And if you just look at it as a problem and you have the mindset, it's just going to keep you there. But if you look at, and that's my way of looking at life, every challenge has an opportunity, right? Every challenge has an opportunity for something in my mind, different, positive, that can create a really good outcome. Um, I would say my mantra, I love something that I have on my website for my business is like, love what you do and success it's a natural symptom. I just absolutely love what I do. It guides my work, but I live on purpose. I live knowing deep inside of me that everything I do is not just in personal service, but it's in service to others. And I think that when we use that, by higher power, being connected to our higher self and being able to do things from a place of intention and making sure that we're contributing positively to our communities, I think that's the most beautiful thing that we can do as humans. And that is really my guiding. If I'm going to do something, for anything I do with my business, obviously with the council, for my family, or on my everyday decisions, I'm going to think of me, but I'm going to think about the impact of my actions to the rest of the world. And I think that regardless of our background, that's something that we can implement.
That's beautiful. Yeah, you're a true steward to our planet. So thank you for following, yeah, what you love and protecting, of course, what we need and what you love. Looking ahead, what's next for you and what's the true legacy that you hope to leave?
Hey, I I don't know what's next for me. I just know that I'm enjoying the present moment. I enjoy what I get to do with my business, the opportunities that I have of connecting with and being able to work with organizations at the state level. I'm enjoying the journey of being able to serve my community in the city council. So I don't know what's next, but I can tell you that I hope to be remembered and part of my legacy of someone that left a positive impact, not just with the projects that I work on, but with my clients and with my community and the people that I serve. And I like to to think that we all have the possibility to be stewards of creating a better place for all.
Indeed. Yeah, if we could all just have that mindset of maybe trying to leave a place better than we find it or have found it. And, whether that's planting a flower bed or something to bring pollinators, even as simple as that. I just think there's so many little things that we can all be part of collectively to continue to push that initiative and at least grounding each other in that understanding of how we can live healthier, happier, and a higher quality lives. Yeah, it just seems like a no-brainer. But sustainability has definitely been, I guess, one of these, again, philosophies and concepts that's evolved, I guess, throughout the movement of the environmental challenges and whatnot through the 70s. But yeah, it's just like this word that I think people should really understand how they can be part of that and not feel like they're part of the problem. But
Hmm.
again, it's educating them on these solutions, how to get involved, And I hope that this conversation has inspired some people to, yeah, learn a little bit more about how they can implement sustainability in their lives, and in their community as well.
Yep, I hope so too.
Please let us know how people can connect with you and get involved with the work that you're currently doing.
Certainly want to thank you for allowing me the opportunity to share my inspiration, my work, my purpose. If folks want to get in contact with me, obviously they can come to my website, Community Development Reimagined. There is a way to reach out. There is a contact form. I'm also on LinkedIn, Diana Geraldo. And if you are in the Lee County area and you want to connect with me as your city council, you can go to the City of Fort Myers, Ward 2, and you will find me there. And there is also a way to reach me and be able to connect if you have an idea or a solution for our local Fort Myers. I'm happy to hear.
Awesome. You should definitely reach out to her, folks, if you are in that area, because I would love to see more change in my backyard, for lack of better words. But I definitely think it's kind of one of those pilot regions of Florida that's kind of adding that ripple effect throughout the state to prove how we can all live a little bit better and more sustainable within our communities here in Florida.